Good afternoon, and welcome to the Future of Sports. I'm Tom Kazmarski, co-founder of Chicago Innovation, and thank you all for being here today at what I am sure will be a very exciting and interesting conversation. To kick things off, let me first introduce Chicago Innovation's Executive Director, Luke Tannen, and the Director of Marketing and Events for Chicago Innovation, Paul Kitty.
Thanks, Tom. And good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Chicago Innovation's first ever sports-focused event. I'm here with the 2002 Connecticut State Tennis Champion, Luke Tannen.
Thank you, Paul. It is good to be here. And yes, I'm still riding high on the euphoria of my former tennis glory. And Paul, you used to be something of a basketball star, isn't that right?
Well, I happen to be a former high school Division IV second string point guard. So yes, I know all about the glory. But today is about the future of sports, not the ancient history of sports.
Ah, yes, exactly. And we do have a great group of speakers who are at the very forefront of shaping the evolution of how we experience sports.
That's right. And speaking of experiencing sports, I think one thing we can all be thankful for is that it's never been easier to covertly watch March Madness during working hours.
You know, that actually is true, Paul. And you know, it was exactly 1 year ago when March Madness was called off. Sports were put on hold and we were all forced to confront a new reality. But you know, part of that new reality, as we've witnessed, was an accelerated focus on innovation.
And sports proved to be far more than a showcase of physical ability and competition, but of problem solving, creativity, and resilience. And I've become as much a fan of the people innovating the industry forward as I am of my favorite teams.
Now, before we meet today's speakers, and it's a great lineup, I want to thank all our year-round Chicago Innovation sponsors. These include our diamond sponsors, SMS Assist, Wintrust, Accenture, and Walgreens. Gold sponsors, Comcast Business and Exelon. Silver sponsor, Vetter Price. Bronze sponsors, Energy BBDO, Crown Castle, LK, Thompson Coburn, Granger, Ramsey Innovations Groupon, and Aero Digital Labs. And our media partners, Intersection, Clear Channel Outdoor, WBBM News Radio, NBC Chicago, and Crane Chicago Business. Now, for the audience here, if you have a question for the panel, please send it to us via the Zoom Q&A. We'll spend the last 15 minutes or so addressing your questions. We also received a lot of great questions from people as they signed up, so we'll incorporate those in the conversation as well. And lastly, keep an eye out for a few polling questions throughout the next hour, because we want to learn more about you, our audience. Okay, now I would like to hand it over to our wonderful moderator, good friend, competitive golfer, and amateur snowmobile rider, Ed Weimer. Ed is the president and CEO of Wintrust, also known as Chicago's Bank, who, in addition to sponsoring Chicago's beloved sports teams, has prioritized support for Chicago's neighborhoods and helping businesses of all sizes throughout this pandemic. So please, everyone, welcome to our virtual sports arena, Ed Weimer.
Thanks, Luke. Thanks, Paul and Tom. Always good to see you. This is always a lot of fun to do these events. I've done a number of them with Chicago Innovation and Wintrust on its own. And next week I've got some guy named Harry and somebody named Megan I'm going to interview. Look out, Oprah, I'm right on your tail. I'd like to start out by introducing today's panelists, and then we'll get on with the show. First, we have Kevin Warren. Kevin is the commissioner of the Big Ten Conference, the oldest Division I collegiate athletic conference, and a powerhouse of the world of collegiate sports. During his first year as commissioner, Kevin launched a series of groundbreaking initiatives to address issues associated with mental health, social justice, voter registration, the COVID-19 pandemic. Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you.
Second, we have Jamie Faulkner. Jamie is the president of business operations for the Chicago Blackhawks, charged with directing the consumer-facing, revenue-generating, and brand aspects of the franchise. Jamie was named one of the Sports Business Journal's Women's Game Changers, also named to their 40 under 40 list in 2016. Welcome, Jamie.
Thank you.
Next, we have Crane Kenny, my old pal. Crane is in his 28th season with the Cubs. Only one World Series, though, Crane. I expected more. He's led the organization's talent acquisition, strategic planning operations, and execution of the 10-year turnaround that has transformed the Cubs to a premier sports team. Welcome, Crane.
Ed, how you doing?
Doing great, thanks. Finally, Sarah Spain. Sarah is an Emmy and Peabody award-winning journalist known for her national ESPN radio show, Spain and Fitz, and her podcast, That's What She Said, with Sarah Spain. She is an ESPN columnist, a regular panelist in ESPN's Around the Horn, and highly questionable, and a contributor to ESPN's Outside the Lines and Sports Center. She's also co-owner of the Chicago Red Stars, the Women's National Soccer League, another one of Wintrust's proud sponsorees. So welcome, Sarah.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for the money, as always.
Money gets you everything, right? Why don't we kick it off with a first poll question? Let's settle this once and for all. Who's the greatest? Michael Jordan, LeBron James, or who's to say? Everyone can vote on this?
I'm voting in this one, that's for sure.
While he's tabulating the scores, I can tell you a funny story. Jerry Reinsdorf said once, he said, some newscaster went up to Michael Jordan and asked him, who would win, your Bulls or LeBron James Lakers? Michael thought for a second. He said, I think the Bulls would definitely win. He said, what would the score be? He said, well, we beat them by about 2 or 4. So why only 2 or 4? He goes, we're almost 60 years old now. We got the answers there? Michael Jordan by a long shot. Awesome. All righty. For all the panelists, I'm going to start with some questions here. And the audience, please send others in, but we got a full gamut anyhow. But last year was a really interesting year for sports. It provided a lot of much needed excitement and distraction and solidarity over the last year. My favorite sports moment of the year was when 4 of the 5 Chicago pro teams made the playoffs. What was your favorite sports and what moved and inspired all of you? Favorite sports moment? Sarah, you want to kick it off?
Sure. Well, I'll be a little biased in saying this, but the NWSL was the first team sport back during COVID with their bubble tournament out in Utah, the Challenge Cup. And that moment, especially for someone who did 3 hours of live radio every night with no sports, was this hurrah moment of, oh my gosh, if this bubble works and this tournament works, we could be back to normal-ish enough to be able to have competition. So it provided a ton of hope. It went off without a hitch, and it kind of paved the way for some of the other leagues to get going as well.
Well, you, Crano?
You know, mine was probably our home opener. We opened July 24th with the Brewers, and Hendricks threw a complete game shutout 3-0 win over the Brewers. It was also the launch for Marquee Sports Network, our much anticipated sort of 5-year saga to get our own network off the ground. So for both a business and the on-field event, you know, coming out of COVID and actually seeing live sports on middle of the summer, so a little later than we had hoped, but that was a big moment for all of us.
Jamie, how about you?
Yeah, I would say mine happened recently. So it was the opening night for Blackhawks. Obviously, first game in my new role. In one of, maybe a handful of people in the United Center for the game. It was fun and exciting to be there in the new role, but I think really made me realize how much we need to have fans back for sports. It's very odd being in that arena with what normally the game experience is like for a Blackhawks game and being able to hear all the players on the ice. So looking forward to having fans back at some point.
Kevin?
Mine, because, we sponsor 28 sports, and I'll say this, seriously, that every sporting event that I've seen in the Big Ten this year for our student athletes has been a really special moment. I mean, we've had some great wins. Recently Wisconsin won the Frozen Four, the national championship last week. I was at Notre Dame last week watching our men's tournament. We have, teams. We have Iowa playing right now in the women's tournament and Michigan making it to the Sweet 16, football, but all of the sports, because I know what our student athletes went through just from a commitment standpoint of daily testing and dealing with all the issues while they're trying to get a world-class education. So anytime I see I have a chance to see them play and I know that they're enjoying it because they love the sport that they play in. All of those have been my favorite sports moment of this year.
That's awesome. Sports has long been considered by many as a global unifier. Do you feel that role intensified during the last year with COVID and the like, or I think a larger role for sports significantly and permanently changed the world going forward? For all of you, somebody try to start it off.
I'll
Go ahead,
chime
Kevin.
in. Oh, go ahead, Kevin.
No, Sarah, go ahead.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Well, I'll just get this out of the way because I think I might be the slight Debbie Downer here. I do think there are so many instances where we've seen the sports world take the lead during the pandemic. It is a unifying thing that brings together people from all backgrounds and spaces, and there's a common sort of unity there. But there was an interesting story in the Atlantic, actually, by my friend Jamel Hill, that talked about some of the ratings decreases and some of the confusion around where and when to find sports. I think that contributed somewhat, but I think also sometimes when we outsize the role of sports, we ignore the ways that it can enable bad behaviors as well because of our loyalty, because of our desire to continue rooting for the teams we love and see the sports we love. So I think there was a real deep look at ourselves, our leagues, our sports, to figure out how sports could be a part of ushering back in normalcy, a part of talking about and sharing the right information about COVID and now vaccines, versus something that contributed to the spread because our loyalty and desire to have it overwhelmed our understanding of the facts and the science. And that battle, I think, was a really interesting one to engage with as a journalist and to watch from afar and then see how people came out of it.
Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just proud, and I agree with certain things that Sarah have said too. But for instance, I look at the Big Ten. Our Indiana football team was the first team to fully register to vote, and so I think what sports, looking at the positives of last year with all the different social justice issues that we were facing, but when I saw our student athletes like Indiana football team step up and say we're all registered to vote, it gave us kind of validation and verification of certain things that we launched, which you alluded to in the introduction, from the Equality Coalition or our voting registration, format, or some of those things that it amplified the voice of our student athletes. And it's just been amazing to watch these young people that typically are between 17 and 23 to really amplify their voice in a very professional, thought-provoking, manner. So it's those kind of things that where I thought that, sports at the collegiate and professional level really served as a great, kind of unifier, not only across our country, but across the world.
They grew up a little faster, didn't they?
Yeah, yeah, they grew up fast, right? I learned a lot from them. So,
Jamie, any thoughts?
I think that's right. I think, people want to be a part of something, and coming to the arena or coming to the ballpark to all together experience something is important. And I think what it did, to Sarah's point earlier, is we all had to take a look at ourselves. I mean, I think at the end of the day, we have the opportunity to stand for more than just winning championships or winning Stanley Cups. And I think that gave us the opportunity to hit the pause button and say, how can we not only help continue to enable community in our buildings, but how do we actually reach out and build community outside, and use our platforms and voices to do that? And I know that everybody on this call, and certainly the brands, all focused on that.
Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah, I would pick up on all that. I think there are a couple of movements this year. Kevin talked about one of them, and we certainly saw it during the baseball season. Jason Hayward, one of our players, stepping forward and actually deciding he was unable to play one day, and his teammates standing behind him in that decision to protest the social justice and social injustice that was really captivating our imagination. And then the same thing happened on the other big movement this year, which was around health, and our players, not just here at the Cubs, but all through the city, coming together to tell people to stay home. Which is a tough message when what they really wanted were fans in the stadiums and arenas, but telling people they needed to do what was right for the collective health of the community, and now doing all the PSAs that they've done for getting vaccinated. So you can see how players step outside the sports arena and understand the voice they have and the ability they have to change behavior. And so really proud of that. And I would say proud of everyone on this call using their facilities for other purposes. So as you know, Ed, because you were helpful in this, we converted Wrigley Field into a food pantry, and we reopened the Hotel Zachary to support healthcare workers. Jamie opened the United Center as a vaccination site, and we'll do the same here at Wrigley Field next week. And so I think you're seeing, everyone realize that our commitment and our obligations to our community exceed wins and losses and trying to fill the stadium, but how we used our facilities and how our players use their voices, really impressive, I thought, this year. And it did, in some ways, to Sarah's point, push to the background a little bit how important winning on the field was. I think, we all know we all live and die by the wins and losses, but at least at a time like this, I think everyone kind of put that maybe on the second burner and moved the health of our community and the discussion that needed to be had around social justice more toward the front burner.
Yeah, something we could all unify on was last year for sure. And kind of showed we're all human, we're all mortal, and no matter what you do in life, you could still get COVID, and a lot of people didn't make it through, and that's very sad, but everybody chipped in, and so far so good, we made it. I want to go to our second audience poll, which is, should college athletes be paid?
I'm a big believer. Oh, go ahead. This would be interesting.
Oh, go ahead. You talk on it, please, while we're counting.
Yeah, it depends. You have to define how you pay. I believe in the collegiate model. My father was a student athlete in the 40s, my brother in the 60s. I was a student athlete in the 80s. My son is a student athlete now. So I spent 21 years in professional sports, and maybe it's the dad in me. I just want to make sure that our student athletes who are on our college campuses are afforded an opportunity to get a legitimate education, not just a diploma, not just a degree, but a legitimate education. But also, we're at an inflection point in college athletics where, with name, image, and likeness and other things, there needs to be some shift as far as how the approach has been handled and the impact of a scholarship and the NIL rights and all those different things. So I definitely believe that NIL is here. It's going to happen. I just don't want to have a patchwork of all these different states doing different things, because I think that'll create opportunities for maybe boorish behavior, bad behavior to occur. I also, the parent in me also wants to make sure that as we proceed forward with NIL rights, that is done in a very thoughtful and methodical manner, and that our student athletes and their families that we provide them with the resources to be educated of what it means. Because as we all know, money is a whole different language. And the thing I'm concerned about is the impact that it does to a team, or how does it impact someone's tax status, or what can they do to make sure it benefits themselves and their families and not to create more issues. Because being 21 years in the NFL, I saw so many rookies who came in just with really just clear and transparent goals. But after the first 2 or 3 years, that the money got in the way of the sport. And I just want to make sure that doesn't interfere with college. And there's something that's special. And I know for me to be able to get an opportunity to earn an education and to be a student athlete and to learn and grow, and relationships I've developed that still some 40 years later are still there. I just think we need to be really thoughtful as we make these decisions, and not of the mindset that money solves all problems, but to be very thoughtful and methodical to make sure that we keep our student athletes at the number one on our list as far as decision making, whatever we decide to do.
Sarah, what do you hear in the world about that?
I'll keep it fairly brief, because I do think, like the poll said, this is a pretty meaty topic. I will say that as a Division I athlete myself, I'm representative of the people who get the experience that is most often used as the primary example, which is someone who benefited from getting to play a sport and get a great education all 4 years, with my sport not getting in the way of that education. I don't think that's always the case for the primarily Black athletes that dominate the revenue sports. And so we hold them up as the examples when we have this conversation against others who have a completely different experience. And so I think we do need to recognize the difference between the average student athlete who is fulfilling the amateur promise of decades ago and the current revenue driving student athlete who is buoying the massive revenues that the NCAA and others are making off of their backs, with a outdated view of their own ability to profit from name, image, and likeness and otherwise. So it's pretty meaty, but it does feel like over the last couple of years, I keep saying this is a pivot point, this is a pivot point, and we haven't fully dived into anything magically different or new, even in those moments that felt like they were sure to move the needle. So yet to come, I guess, that massive sea change that we keep thinking is coming.
Yeah, we should probably look at the results. I was so bad in college, I would have had to pay them for sure. Oh, look, it's pretty 39-26, way too common issue for a poll. Pretty much down the line here. I think that kind of sums it up, isn't it? A real bowl of spaghetti, trying to find the end of a bowl of spaghetti. Great. Hey, Kevin, you became Big Ten commissioner about 3 months before the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
Talk about a baptism of fire, huh?
Yeah.
When you took on the role, what opportunities excited you for innovating at the conference level versus the big changes you're hoping to make in the coming year?
Yeah, I told someone last week, I said, when I got the job and it was announced, I got a slew of books about the first 90 days, the first 100 days on the job, but no one sent me one that says the first 72 days in the global pandemic would, hit. And I know, a lot of us, like Jamie, people have different roles, but I think that's where the importance of being an athlete comes in. You figure it out. There's no, you may game plan all week and expect a zone, and they come out and man-to-man and press you the whole game, and you just kind of figure it out. So I think what the one fortunate thing, and one of my leadership coaches said, I can't say the H word anymore because I used to talk about 2020 was a hard year. He said, don't say that. It was an important year. And so that's where I've been focusing on it. It was important because I think what it did is reiterated to us the importance of innovation. And it was, as was said earlier, there's only so many reruns and masters and great games and boxing matches you can watch, but there's something special about live sports. And even with us at the Big Ten tournament last week, by even us having limited fans at our women's and men's games, people and the reaction of people and live sports and all those different things really does matter. And so one of the things I've been spending a lot of time on this last year of making sure we bring all the positivity forward out of the negativity that COVID created, and how do we meld that from an interactive innovation standpoint for our fans? What can we do now that we know we can work from home and work from Zoom, and fans that haven't been at the games, but now as they start coming back, what can we do to create those same, experience that make them feel comfortable? So I'm excited about some of the things we're all working on. I know everyone on this call, and as our fans start coming back, I'm excited to see what Jamie and the Blackhawks are doing. I'm a huge hockey fan. Now that our fans can come back into the arena, what will make that experience different, all the way from food to viewing to different things we can do. So we'll have some things that we'll be rolling out in the fall as far as from an innovation standpoint that probably, but for COVID, we never would even gotten to this point, at least as quickly as we have.
I agree. If I have to sit through one more Zoom meeting, I'd rather have a dead rat in my mouth than do it. But for Jamie and Crane, you had to shift your mindset from long-term innovation to short-term survival and crisis-driven innovation. What are some of the changes you had to implement over the last year you see as positive long-term changes, things that will stick, things you learned during this that can stick going forward?
I mean, we haven't been open, but I think, when I used to talk to clients before coming to the Blackhawks, we used to talk about innovation being 3 to 5 years out. These things are going to happen. I think COVID has just accelerated the timeline for teams and venues to start to enable more technology. I think for us at the Blackhawks and United Center and with the Bulls, we're first and foremost committed to the safety when we bring fans back. There's a lot of great technology we were already in the process of implementing, like frictionless markets, contactless food and beverage, that will help us either get people through the lines faster or keep them safer. And so I think our fans, when we have the ability to have them back, will start to see that in the building. And our goal is to continue on that path, is to roll out a very frictionless, contactless experience, not only for safety, but also for enjoyment. We want them in their seats as much as possible. We don't want them standing in lines, waiting to get back and enjoy their experience. So for us, it's just helped accelerate it. I think that not the downside, but I think that the challenge is it's really hard to convert a very large building into, enabling all this technology. So for us, the barrier is going to be how quickly, given our physical footprint, can we enable some of these technologies, but we sure are already in motion with that and are going to stay committed to that going forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I'll pick up on that. And, for us, we play in a museum. So, we've been playing baseball at the corner of Clark and Addison here for 105 years, and change is not always welcome. And we got to balance sort of the protection of our traditions and our history with innovating for the future. And so, like Jamie said, we typically look at technology roadmaps that run out 3, 4, 5 years. So this has really given us a chance to reimagine the fan experience at Wrigley Field, beginning with how you come into the ballpark. We'll see new technology here on April 1st that allow people to come in without having to disgorge their phones and their keys and their wallets onto a conveyor belt where someone touches them on the way through. There's new technology from a company called Evolve. They'll let people walk in 2 or 3 abreast. You won't have to take anything out of your pockets. There are no conveyor belts. There's no one looking in your purse. You can come right into the ballpark, and all that screening technology, very helpful for the future, both from a security standpoint and queuing the lines a little easier. Jamie mentioned cashless and digital tickets. We're going to go completely digital on the ticketing side once again, to eliminate some of the back and forth between our wonderful ushers and our fans coming in. And the same thing at the concession lines, where we'll do mobile ordering and cashless. So we kind of have reimagined, like, what would it be? What should we look for to protect our fans, but also to advance our technology roadmap? And because we're only going to open with 25% of our fans, you would never talk about an opening day with only, call it 10,000 people in the building. We're mandated to only have 10,000. So now you can kind of ease your way into some of these things that might be abrupt for a crowd of 40,000, can be done a little more easily with just graduated crowds. So we're taking advantage of the way we're opening to do some new things, and I think pay off in the long run.
You think these are all going to stick long term, or we'll just revert to the mean?
No, I think we stick long term with this. Because it's a new roadmap, we're going to have to leave ourselves room to pivot for things that don't go exactly right. But certainly, I don't think anyone would object to coming into the building easier, waiting in lines less, getting fresher concessions. So most of the things, I think, once you've, for instance, downloaded the app to do mobile ordering and inserted your credit card information to make it easy. Again, there'll be a little bit of turbulence, I think, as we get started, but I can't imagine somebody who wouldn't want to have, a better experience once they're in the park.
Yeah. And I would just add to that too, that I think typically on the sports end, we get all these new technology startups that want to test something in venue, but consumers in their daily lives aren't conditioned yet to use that tech. I think what we're seeing is the opposite here. Mobile ordering for food and beverage has never been easier. Getting groceries contactless have never been easier. And so consumers outside of our walls have been very well conditioned and now have a higher set of expectations around how we interact with them. And so I think we have to bring the technology in. I think it'll be here to stay. And I think there'll be a lot of pressure for us to bring it in as quickly as we can, because they're seeing it outside every day in their lives.
We're still gonna have beer guys and hot dog guys, are we?
Oh yeah, we still have them. But think about it, like old timers like you and me, right? Like I was not very adept with Zoom technology. I did not navigate through sort of a digital world as easily as certainly as my younger counterparts, and certainly Jamie and her team. But we've all been forced to do it, right? If you're going to continue to be employed and work remotely, like we've had to learn it. And because of COVID, right? I'm way further up the tech curve than I would have been. And I think our fans are ready for that coming into our venues.
On a relative basis, I think we're still at the same place we were at the tech curve, though. Relatively speaking.
Yeah, relatively speaking. You're right.
Hey, Sarah, a question for you. You had a very successful career as a columnist, anchor, podcast host, reporter. You know as well as anyone that to talk about sports is to engage in conversation about issues of culture, race, gender, and inclusion. What space do you see sports occupying as it relates to giving a voice and a platform to these societal issues? Is it right for athletes to support and what's the role of athletes in sports social media?
Yeah, we touched on this a little bit earlier. And I think all three panelists had great things to offer about in their world, how especially the social issues that presented themselves after George Floyd last year really forced a lot of people to address things that even maybe they weren't normally comfortable with, and reminded us yet again that it's pretty impossible to separate humanity from sports, as much as some would like to envision our athletes as entertainers who are bereft of anything outside of what they do on the field or court. I think we all know that's not true. And it actually allows us a ton of powerful conversations because of the way sports brings together disparate people. It's one of the few spaces where someone from a different ethnicity and race and religion and background and everything else can sit right next to someone else and root for the same outcome and connect about that outcome. And we also can have conversations that people might not seek out in other spaces, but will come up organically within the sports world because of an athlete or a team, and allow us to engage those people and get them on board with learning and educating because it's in the sports space, and they'll feel connected to it in a way they might not if it was solely political or otherwise. So, I mean, I think the WNBA last year is a fantastic example of a league of women coming together with a specific cause and with a direction. And they really leaned into their very progressive ideals. In other sports, it's probably more of a balance for the fan base and the participants. In certain sports like the WNBA, it leans heavily African-American, heavily progressive. The ideals that matter to the players are a lot what matters to the fans that view the games. And so they leaned into it to the point of flipping the Senate, right? I mean, they literally had a massive role in seeing that happen. So I think I would like to think, although having conversations with others who are older than me and have done this generation after generation and watched us keep starting over again, I'd like to think that what happened last year marked a pivot point for a lot of white people in terms of realizing that being neutral is a choice and is actually a part of the problem. If you are not actively educating yourself to the role of white people and of society's choices in history and how they were intended to affect minority people and marginalized groups, intended to keep them down and keep certain people in power. If you haven't educated yourself and worked to change that and become anti-racist and anti-misogynist and anti-homophobic, then you are allowing those things to continue because you've decided the status quo serves you. Those conversations were not happening at the level that we're having them now. And I'd like to think going forward, there's an expectation for people to at least start there instead of getting there and feeling proud of themselves. Maybe that's wishful thinking, but I think a lot of athletes have done their part in that. And I think that pause couldn't race away to vacation or a concert or a sporting event. We were a literally captive audience in our homes to have those conversations. Hopefully will be meaningful.
Thank you. That was well said. Let's go to our audience poll question number 3. Who will be the next? Who will bring the next championship to Chicago? Blackhawks, Cubs, Red Stars, or other?
Trying to start a fight here?
We're looking at that, Kevin. I got to ask you: is that Louis Armstrong over your shoulder?
That is Louis Armstrong. Yeah.
Oh, what a great! He's awesome. Satchmo.
Yeah, right. Ironically, there's an artist out of Yugoslavia that my wife found, and we collect a lot of art. And I have to reiterate to her how talented she is, and so he's one of my sister. I'm the youngest of 7 kids. My oldest sister used to play It's a Wonderful World. So anything I can find about Louis Armstrong, I get. So that's a reminder of her. She passed with brain cancer. So that's a special painting. Special painting in our house. So thank you for noticing, though.
It's a great pick.
Yeah.
He was awesome. I love Louis.
Oh, look at that.
Well, even up.
All right. I like this. I like this fan base. They know we've been to the semis year after year. We're on the brink of breaking through and getting that title.
Hey, good things happen when Wintrust sponsors you. You just have to ask Crane.
So true. Wintrust, the Bank of the Red Stars.
There you go.
Right.
Love it. Hey, Kevin, we're in the midst of, I don't know if you knew this or not, but we're in the midst of some great basketball tournaments.
Yeah.
The Big Ten Conference was very well represented in the beginning, but boy, talk about upsets, I'll tell you. My Hoyas went down quickly.
Yeah.
I don't think Crane's Domers got in, did they? Sorry, Crane, but
No, they did not.
9 men's teams and 7 women's teams were selected to compete. Looking at how these teams pulled off successful seasons amid the madness, pun was intended. What lessons can we learn about innovation and leadership we can apply to our own businesses and companies?
Yeah, I mean, what's been interesting, and I've had dinner with there's a company out of Colorado called BioD6, and they're the ones that handled our daily testing. And if you talk with them, I've been just shocked that like a year ago, there was no such thing as a company that was in the COVID testing. Didn't exist. And so it's been a reminder to me, whether you're in banking or in sports or whatever the case may be, there are so many opportunities for innovation and creativity. So I've challenged our staff, are there businesses right now, business units, business opportunities that we as the Big Ten Conference should be exploring that we haven't even thought about? And so I just think it's a reminder, for us, and which leads to all the things now we rely upon that we're not even in our vernacular 14 months ago. And so I think what it showed from our conference standpoint and our student athletes and everyone involved is, we have so much more room for kind of growth and to be stretched. If you had told our student athletes 14 months ago, or some of our recruits, hey, come to campus and you're gonna have to be tested every single day, people would have not believed it. And so I just think that last year was a reminder, one, for us to have a little grace and mercy on ourselves and others, and also to never forget the power of the mind and how strong we are as people, and how creative we really are. And so it's a whole nother. We did a wonderful job of this at our time with the Vikings. We had a whole, what we call just a creativity think room, an area where people can drop their ideas, and it sprouted a lot of businesses and ideas. And that's something when we open back up at the Big Ten, I'm going to do there. I think we just need, so many times in college athletics, we're just taught, from an institutional knowledge standpoint, this is how it's been done. Just do it that way, which is great. But also, especially with the talent of all of our young people, is for us to create that creativity and almost empower it. So that's something I'm looking forward to once we can get back together, just to, what did we learn from last year and what are the things we can do? One of the things I said before I came in, it just reminded me last week that I would love to do and planning on doing it, is there a way, and not is there a way, how do we make it happen where we have our men's and women's tournament at the same time? Kind of like in high school. I remember, wouldn't it be awesome to have our two semifinals games, a women's game, a men's game, a women's game, a men's game, and then have a championship Sunday where we have a women's game and the men's game. And because I was in Indianapolis, I saw 26 games in 5 days. I went to every women's game and I went to every men's game. Now, some I'd have to leave at halftime, and I'd been sitting there saying, why can't we have it in the same shared space to be able to do it? And I think those are things that we have to do to empower all of our sports, but especially our women's sports. And instead of being judgmental with some of the things that have happened at the tournament, as a conference leader, we just need to take control of it and start bringing these, together, because there's so many gifted athletes from a men and women's standpoint. But those are the things that, but for COVID, probably maybe we would have thought about and activated 5 years from now. But now it's something that I'm already planning on to make it happen next year.
Wow.
And Wintrust could be a sponsor. That's how we're really do it.
Why not?
That's right.
Is that Kevin? Is that your way of saying you were going to bring the Big Ten tournament to Chicago?
Absolutely. We're coming back in 23, but I've thought about it. I was in Notre Dame for our hockey, and I was thinking, what can we do with the Blackhawks to have a whole day of hockey? We're all the way from squirts and peewees all the way up to the Blackhawks, our pro hockey teams and our footprint with our college. I just think what this has shown, just like this panel, is that we're all dealing with the same issues. They just have different names on them, regardless of the sports. And that we just need to figure out a way to be able to work together and create that opportunity where 1 + 1 = 75 instead of 2.
It's amazing what you can get out of the young people, especially coming out of this and what they've experienced. And a lot of times you said earlier, this is the way I always used to do. This is the way I always used to do it. And if you listen to the young people, boy, you get some great ideas. I'll tell you.
Yeah, right.
The ones in the front of the line, they're great.
Yeah.
What are we thinking about virtual sports these days? I would imagine that not being able to get together, virtual sports has taken off and maybe accelerated a bit the development of it. What's the future hold for that? I know there's even colleges that are having virtual sports tournaments.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think the future holds for that? For everybody, Crane, what do you think?
Well, and virtual takes on a whole bunch of different meanings, and we've all learned a lot about it with COVID. I think we're really at the beginning of sort of the consumer experience and how we all enjoy our games. I think our especially at home experience is going to be far more interactive as we go forward. You're seeing all that stuff happening right now. Sports betting is going to be a part of that interaction. I think we're going to see the ability to wager on games from your home, in a really seamless way, which has just become part of the vernacular today. And I think the experience at home just gets richer and richer. So I think that we were forced into it this year in some ways. I think it's going to become sort of table stakes for us going forward in terms of how we bring our events, which, as you know, we're monetizing over 3 or 4 different platforms, right? We've got the in-person experience when you're at Wrigley Field. You've got your at-home experience, television and radio, and then you've got the digital experience, which is just the latest and greatest. But so I think 5 years from now, we may look back at COVID much like we did talking about technology in the buildings and say it was the catalyst for a lot of change.
Jamie?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, like even in our own household, when we sit down to watch a Blackhawks game, and I'm sure we'll experience this when we start watching the Cubs games, is that, my teenager who's 17, he engages with the game very differently using his, multiple screens. I got a 5-year-old in the room on her iPad trying to figure out what this hockey thing is. And I think we've realized all watching this content together, everybody wants to engage in it in a different way. And I think there are going to be more opportunities going forward to have what I call like this simultaneity of experience. We're all watching the same game, but we might be watching a different broadcast of it that is geared towards the way we want to consume it on any given day. And I think second screens will allow us to do that. We're testing some of that right now with our Blackhawks fans so that the 5-year-old can have a different experience with hockey than the 18-year-old can have. So I think it's just opened up, and I think Kevin made a great point, which is, we've learned in the last 14 months, we can do anything. And that when we have to make a change, we can. And I just think the innovation and the transformation that'll happen in sports, whether that's from a digital aspect, in whatever way that takes shape through AR or VR, different types of streaming, or what that looks like in the in-game experience, is going to be drastically different. And I think it's shown that we can make changes. We don't have to enjoy sports in the same way we have for several years. And we just have to figure out what are the things we want to keep the same, what are the things we're willing to change and make different. But if we don't, I feel like we're all going to be competing against Fortnite. So we do all need to band together.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're all in trouble.
Yeah. Pat Foley and I were old high school pals. I don't know if you knew that or not.
Oh, I did not know that.
One time we were told by the chemistry instructor who was screwing around, he said, Mr. Weimer, Mr. Foley, I want you to go in the lab, shut all the doors and windows and turn on the gas. What a student I was. But what do you think about collegiate virtual sports? Kevin and Sarah?
I defer to Sarah first.
Well, so there's two sides of it, right? There's sort of the virtual experience, which is what Crane and Jamie talked about, which we saw even some innovation over COVID, like virtual fans, which some networks elected to do, and others decided to just go with the cardboard. We saw the giant screen in the NBA bubble that had that interaction. And then we've seen already with Twitch that you can be actually in the middle of a game and betting on moments that are about to happen or things that are about to occur. There's that side of it, which I think, like Jamie said, especially people who have been rooted in their ways, maybe otherwise would be more reticent to change, but because there's been so much change over the last year, we're getting a little bit more flexible in terms of not feeling as apprehensive about when things were used to look a little bit different. So there's that. And then there's actual e-games, which you referenced, which is you can get a college scholarship now for playing a video game. There's an NBA 2K league that has a draft and health benefits. In fact, the health benefits of the NBA 2K league made the league go back and change the benefits of their G League physical basketball players who were getting worse benefits than their video game players. And as soon as that was brought up, they were like, oops, gotta go revisit that. So there is this tension, right, that's gonna come out of those two warring factors. I'm not as up to date on the e-game stuff as everybody else is, but it is a massive market. And all of us old heads who are trying to ignore it and pretend it's not coming, like Jamie said, we will get killed by Fortnite, and we will totally get run over if we don't embrace and understand at least what's coming down the pike with esports as well.
You get your ACL blood out, you get carpal tunnel, other two.
Right, absolutely. Everyone needs glasses.
Let's hit audience poll number 5 if we could. What is an area of innovation in sports you'd like to see accelerated? The virtual sports experience, the in-person experience, closer connections between fans and athletes, player safety and prevention, injury prevention. As we're waiting for this, let's think about, we have one more question, then we're going to go to the audience questions. I'm interested in what Kevin has to say about this as well as everybody else, but the increased focus on legalized gambling, does this change how you engage with your audiences? What it means for the Cubs, Blackhawks, Red Stars, and Big Ten? I'm very interested in that, and I'm just a guy who's played dirt and grass, but
Mm-hmm.
let's see how
I
we
mean,
go.
in my world, it came fast and furious because I was not a gambler. So I would be trying to figure out, what do they mean by spread, and what does this mean with the odds? And then all of a sudden, as soon as it got legalized in enough places, then there was an anticipation that across our network, whether it's radio or television or otherwise, that there's going to be full shows about gambling, that there's going to be segments where you bring on, the sharps and they tell you what to do. So I'm still trying to learn from the journalist perspective and understand that it is a massive revenue driver, and it's one that all of these leagues are going to want a piece of if for the longest time everybody else has made money off of it and not them. As for the Red Stars, we're still across the country and in Illinois making sure that the rules still apply to women's leagues as well. There's plenty of sports books that don't carry women's sports the same way they do men. So we're still pushing for equality there, because plenty of people want to be chasing on a Red Stars game just as much as they're chased anywhere else. So yeah, I mean, it's been, to speak to everyone's points on the last year, that has also proved that something can happen quickly and massively. Obviously gambling, it was a long time coming, but once it hit, it's overhauled a whole lot of spaces.
They say that money corrupts, so it's going to have to be really a controlled environment, especially in college. I mean, we start paying the kids to play or to be there, and then the gambling comes in. There's all sorts of propensity for bad things to happen. Same with the old Black Sox. Remember those guys years ago? Money gets people to the wrong places. What do you think, Kevin and Crane? What do you think about, and Jamie? How are you going to control it? What do you think that it's the end run's going to be here?
Well, I'll jump in. So first of all, it is a huge new field, and as you know, with us, we've made a partnership with DraftKings. They'll be the official sports betting partner for our team. We're going to be building a sports book here at Wrigley Field, just like they are at the United Center, where people can place in-person wagers. A lot of it will be mobile. The majority of the sports betting will be mobile, so it'll be register, at your favorite sports betting site, DraftKings or other, and place your wager while you're in the ballpark. And it's interesting in baseball. We've been watching mound ball and various other sports betting activities since I was 15 years old. What's interesting for me now is I got a mid-20s son. There isn't probably a single event he watches that he doesn't have a wager of, $2, $3, $4, $5 on. And I always ask him, I said, you can't afford to be wagering on all these games. And he'll say, hey, Dad, it's like $5. And it just makes the game more interesting to him. And, March Madness has been the source of sports betting in your firm, Ed, and mine, for 30 years. And whether it was sanctioned or not, this has been happening for a long, long time, is my point, whether it's mound ball at a Wrigley game or March Madness in our various places of employment. And so it's, in some ways, we're bringing it out of the darkness, not out of the shadows, and into the light, and it's being regulated. I think you make a very good point on amateur athletes and athletes in general, to make sure that this doesn't corrupt their play on the field, although that's been an issue forever as well. And I think we all know, with Pete Rose and some of the Black Sox scandals and other things we've talked about with our officials too, in getting caught up in it. So there's been a need for regulation. I think we've brought it out of the darkness and into the light to some degree, very highly regulated. It's become more legitimized. So I think we do have to worry about people who shouldn't be wagering, getting into this business. And I think a lot of education is necessary there. So we have a big effort in front of us to make sure it's done well. But I also think it's additive. And kind of to Jamie's point about losing a generation of fans to Fortnite, this is something that is very appealing to the younger generation, the younger demo. And I think if we do it well, both from the business side as well as the consumer side, it can be a plus to our games. So you can tell I'm supportive of it, but again, agree on the need for education and regulation.
Jamie, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with all those points. I think gamification is huge. And I think it will change how we interact and give us opportunities to reach new fan bases. So people that are just general fans of sports that now want to come in and bet on hockey. So I think it'll change the content that we produce, but I also think we need to approach it with balance, to be aware of making sure that we're doing all the right things from a revenue standpoint, that we are pushing the leagues as well as ourselves to make sure that we're providing the right balance on, gambling and making sure that we've got the right safety nets there, either with our own employees or with our players and our athletes. So I think we just have to go in eyes wide open, but it's new. I think we're all trying to forge this path together. I think it'll look very different a year from now, but I think everybody's excited about it. We just want to approach it in the right and responsible way.
Kevin?
That's where my head is, especially, mine being a little different from an intercollegiate, athletic standpoint. So I'm, very, very focused and to make sure that we address all of these issues, especially with gambling in a very methodical fashion, because I just think it's, that's critically important. And, the role that it plays in college athletics, currently in the future, is something that I will always, be concerned about. And I just want to make sure that we keep the sanctity and the kind of the essence of what intercollegiate athletics is about, and be very judicious and cautious of how this grows and the touch points, with the entire, gambling and sports betting area.
Great. We have the response to, here we go. Virtual experience 11%, in-person 43, clear connection 20, player safety intervention 21. Others respond in the chat 4%. Surprised the in-person experience is number one, but anyhow. Well, we got 6 minutes left. Paul, are you out there? Do you want to hit us with some of the audience questions here? Luke or Paul?
Sure, Ed. Yeah, we got a few that came in. So I'll start with one. This is from Jennifer, and she is asking, what do you see on the summer horizon, and will we have a roaring back to sports?
Go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, I mean, it starts out with rules based on Chicago regulations. So for baseball and for Red Stars and everything else, it's based on the percentage allowed. I don't think we'll have a roaring back. I kind of hope we don't have a roaring back. I think we should have a smart and wise return based on the science. But I do think all the vaccinations that are going at so much faster, I'm so hopeful about how quickly we've been able to vaccinate across the city and the country, is going to help a ton. And then I think I was at 2 Cubs games out in Arizona a couple of weeks ago. They very smartly approached the pod system, and it felt very safe to be there with a limited fan base. So I think we start out with those experiences for lesser groups, and then we go from there. But I think to do it wisely is the best way to do it. We're looking across to some of the countries that were ahead of us in the pandemic. They got it before us, and now they're back to being shut down after experiencing some great success. So I think we can't rush back in too quickly.
Yeah, I'll pick up on Sarah's point. So we've had a little bit of a test tube out in Arizona with a much smaller ballpark but limited capacity. And I'll give all the credit to the fans. You can tell them what to do, but them actually following the rules in a whole different way of experience a game is something of a question mark. And the fans have been really responsible. And, we're painting circles out on the berm and telling people to keep their blankets and, as they kind of sit on the berm in certain places, and they're doing it. We're asking them to wear masks, and they are. We're asking them not to queue up in lines, and they're not. So I think we've all been conditioned to think about life a little less selfishly. And if we want to have an experience together doing something like a sporting event, I think people have been really responsible. At least that's what we're seeing in Arizona, and I wouldn't expect anything different here in Chicago. So I'd agree. I'm not sure roaring is the right word, but I think the ability to go enjoy music and sports and restaurants together again is definitely on the horizon for us here in Chicago. And I'm very optimistic for this summer.
That's great. Luke, you got another one?
Yes, here's a question from Paul, and he is asking, what is the next innovation for athlete performance or innovation within the games themselves?
Athlete performance. I don't know what that could possibly even refer to.
Yeah, we'd have to get our sports performance folks in the call. I'm still amazed by the Cubs having proprietary video games through which they could tell that Kyle Schwarber had the best eye and therefore could be inserted into a World Series lineup after missing a whole season because he was so good at Theo's video game. I mean, that kind of stuff amazes me. So they're already so far ahead of what we imagine in terms of all that stuff. But I'm guessing the innovations probably haven't made it to us yet. They're probably still in those think tanks with the sports performance folks.
I'll throw a couple of things out, Ed, that I see us, well, put this way, we're spending a lot of money chasing. One is it's around the mental skills. So Sarah talked about an old school tool now back 5-6 years ago, which was measuring your quick twitch muscle fibers. I think we're doing a ton of work around sleep and nutrition. We're doing a ton of work around predictive injuries. If I can tell when a player is going to have an injury based on various biomechanics and kinetic chain information, obviously you may not draft that person, you may not sign that free agent, or you may more quickly trade a player based on some information you're learning about their kinetic chain and their likelihood of injury, especially when we look at pitching. And so I think in terms of like analytics and the work we're doing around kinesiology, sleep, nutrition, other health related things that are not necessarily, can you hit 100-mile-an-hour fastball, but how do you prepare yourself for a game? How do you recover from a game? I know we're plowing a ton of money in those places. And I think that's where you're going to see some really interesting success, as well as some of the AI technology you're now seeing employed, where we have a machine that can actually replicate every pitcher's best pitch. So if you want to understand how to hit, a certain pitcher's slider,
That's pretty cool.
you can see the cage and you can see that slider coming off of a machine. It'll have the exact same velocity and direction and the same look to the hitter. So you are seeing some, besides just the science part, you're seeing some tools that we're developing. And I think that stuff, we're not the only team. There's 29 other clubs that are plugging the same money into these same chases. But I think you see a lot of technology helping our players get better on the field and stay healthier.
That's awesome. Unfortunately, I think we've hit the appointed end of our discussion here. It's 4:59. I know the Chicago Innovation likes to be exactly on time. I'd like to thank all of you for being part of this, and I'm going to turn it back over to Luke.
Great. Thank you, Ed. And thank you for doing a terrific job leading today's session. And Crane, Kevin, Sarah, Jamie, you are an outstanding panel. So on behalf of all of us at Chicago Innovation, everyone in the crowd, thank you for everything that each of you are doing to keep the world of sports humming along really for the rest of us by investing in innovation. That sounds like it will really make the fan experience better than ever before in so many facets. And also, thank you too for helping us all realize that sports teams and the entire industry really is a platform to elevate humanity as a whole, even just beyond sports themselves. And I think that message really shone through a lot in today's conversation. So finally, I also want to thank our great audience who tuned in today for being a part of Chicago Innovation's 20th anniversary year of educating, connecting, and celebrating innovators. We have more events and programming planned this year than ever before. And the next opportunity for all of us to reconvene is on April 7th. So mark your calendars. We'll be jumping from the world of sports into the world of art. Two very different worlds, but both great strengths in Chicago. For this event called the Art of Innovation. It's a virtual event featuring a panel of some terrific, innovative Chicagoans in the arts. So stay tuned for that invitation in the coming days. In the meantime, stay well, take care of yourself, take care of each other, get vaccinated if you can, and thank you again to this group. We look forward to seeing all of you again real soon.